Hey everyone, we're here with Unit 4, the last unit in our course, and it involves covering chapters 13, 14, 15, and 16. It's all about body weight, body composition, how to maintain your weight, about weight loss, how to gain weight, and then finally ending up with eating disorders in athletes. So I have this picture here to start with just to remind you all that athletes come in all different shapes and sizes. And that's important. We need to appreciate our bodies and all the amazing things that they do for us. Okay, so to get started, first thing we want to just talk about, because we want to use this information for good. Okay, I'm trying to find a good place for that. I think I'll just stick it right down there. Okay, all this information we're learning about weight and body mass index in the next couple slides and a percent body fat. We want to use this information for good. And so we need to have a little discussion about how to use the information. And so the most important thing I want you all to know is that when you stand on a scale, all it gives you is just a number. Okay. The scale doesn't tell us how much lean tissue we have, how much fat tissue we have, and how much water it makes up our body. And the scale doesn't measure all of your achievements or the type of person you are. And so sometimes people get so caught up in what they weigh on the scale and that it just totally rules their thoughts and their life and it becomes an obsession. I want everyone to understand that your whole self-worth needs to be based on something other than the weight or percent body fat that you are. And so if you're an athlete, you want to, think about the sport that you play and what are your stats in that sport? How successful are you? Measure it by that. If, all of you are students, so what type of student are you? How are you doing in your classes? Are you making great grades? That's something to look at. That's a huge achievement. Do you volunteer? What kind of family member are you? What type of teammate are you? All of those things are important. The number on the scale, not so much. All right. So remember, as we go through this material today, we want to use it for good. We don't want to make it an obsession, and we don't want the scale, again, to rule our thoughts. All right, so let's get started. We're going to talk a little bit about body composition. And this is important because when I'm working with athletes, we want athletes to understand that we need a healthy balance between lean tissue and fat tissue. And when we look at the human body, we want to know that it's made up of a number of different components. First of all, everybody needs fat on their body. So we have our total body fat. And we're going to talk about two types of fat today, essential fat and adipose tissue. And then, of course, bone makes a good part of our weight, the fat-free mass of lean tissue, and then water. Water makes up most of our weight. 60% of a male body weight is made up of water. Females, a little bit less, about 55%, and that's because females have more fat than we're supposed to. So just a couple of fun facts here. People tend to think that muscle tissue is just pure protein, and it's not. If we actually look at the composition of muscle tissue, 70% of what muscles are made up of is water, okay? It's only 22% protein, and then there's about 8% of the total weight coming from fat, some carbohydrate, which would be the stored glycogen in the muscle, and minerals, right? So fun fact, just to know, a pound of muscle only has about 100 grams of protein in it. All right, so let's talk a little bit about essential fat now. So very important message to understand. Everybody needs fat on their body. And yes, you can be too thin, right? So let's define what essential fat is first. Essential fat is found in the brain, your nerve tissue, your bone marrow, your heart tissue, and your cell membranes. And essential fat is needed for your body to function properly. So for males, essential fat makes up about 3 to 5% of their body weight, depending upon what resource you're looking at for this information. And females' essential fat ranges from somewhere between 12 to 15% of the total body weight. Now I want to make this clear. This is the minimal amount of fat that you need on your body for good health. These are not body fat percentage goals in terms of being used to say that, oh, I only want to be 12% fat. No, all right? You all are going to need a little bit more fat on your body than just essential fat. But this is the bare minimum. Okay. right, so now we're talking a little bit about adipose tissue. So adipose tissue is another way of saying fat tissue, and or is another type of fat tissue. And adipose tissue is made up of what we call adipocytes. That's the name for the fat cells, and their function is basically storing excess calories as fat. So fat tissue or adipose tissue is located under the skin, as we see here. Okay. There's a layer of fat directly underneath your skin. About half the fat in your body lies directly underneath your skin. This is called subcutaneous fat, sub meaning under, cutaneous meaning skin. And then we have fat lying deep within the abdominal cavity. So it's actually lying underneath your abdominal muscles. So this fat that lies deep within your abdominal cavity is known as visceral fat. So it hangs over the stomach and the intestines. So the function of subcutaneous fat is to help insulate the body against cold temperatures, and it also helps to protect muscles and bones from injury. And as I showed you in the previous picture here, we have subcutaneous fat all over our body. But in this picture here, it's just showing where you might have some thicker layers of it. Okay. And then visceral fat. Here is a good drawing of visceral fat. Right here, and as we mentioned, it does hang over the stomach and the intestines, and it lies underneath, as I mentioned earlier, your abdominal muscles. And having too much visceral fat does put you at an increased risk for things like type 2 diabetes and heart disease. All right, so we're going to end the video there. When we come back, we're going to talk about ways to evaluate your body weight for health.